This is not a rumor, it is not propaganda, and it is not speculation. This is the reality unfolding in Nigeria right now. After the December 25, 2025 airstrikes in Sokoto State, the United States has moved its full intelligence focus back to Nigeria's most infamous terror sanctuary, the Sambisa Forest. And what is happening in the skies above Borno State signals a new and dangerous chapter in Nigeria's long war with terrorism, a chapter that exposes years of failure, denial, compromise, and silent suffering. And before we go any further, follow this channel, subscribe, and stay with us, because this is not surface level news. This is the story behind the story that affects the survival of millions of Nigerians. In the days following the Sokoto airstrikes that targeted ISIS-linked Lakurawa camps in the Bawuni forest, flight tracking data and security intelligence confirmed that a US Gulfstream V aircraft, a platform commonly configured for intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance missions, resumed persistent operations over Borno State, specifically hovering above the Sambisa Forest and its surrounding corridors. This was not accidental, it was not routine, and it was not symbolic. It was deliberate, calculated, and rooted in intelligence assessments that indicate ISWAP remains active, adaptive, and dangerous despite years of military claims that Sambisa has been cleared. Sambisa Forest is not just a location, it is the ideological and operational heart of jihadist insurgency in Nigeria. It is where Boko Haram once ruled openly, where schoolgirls were taken, where villages were erased, where captives were held, where commanders regrouped after defeat, and where ISWAP later entrenched itself after splitting from Boko Haram, leveraging superior organization, foreign connections, and tactical discipline. And despite repeated announcements by Nigerian authorities over the years claiming Sambisa had been reclaimed, the reality on ground has consistently contradicted those claims, with ambushes, IED attacks, kidnappings, and coordinated assaults continuing to originate from the forest and its satellite camps. The US surveillance resumption did not happen in isolation. It followed weeks of growing concern in Washington over escalating violence in Nigeria's northwest and northeast, including mass killings, attacks on highways, church assaults, and the increasing sophistication of terrorist tactics, particularly the use of improvised explosive devices, which had long been associated with Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan, but are now becoming normalized in Nigeria. An intelligence assessment suggests that these tactics are not locally improvised alone, but influenced by transnational jihadist training and doctrine, something that raises red flags for US counter-terrorism planners. The Sokoto airstrikes were a turning point. They targeted camps linked to ISIS affiliates, accused of orchestrating attacks against civilians, religious communities, and security forces, and the strikes were authorized after months of warnings and intelligence buildup. Once those strikes were executed, it became clear that Sokoto was not the end of the map. It was the beginning of a broader operational picture, because terrorism in Nigeria is not isolated by geography. Fighters move between northwest and northeast corridors, weapons flow through porous borders, and command structures communicate across states using couriers and encrypted channels. And Sambisa remains the most strategic node in that network. The Gulfstream V surveillance aircraft is not a bomber. It does not fire missiles. What it does is more dangerous to terrorists than bombs. It sees, it listens, it maps, it identifies patterns, movement routes, leadership gatherings, logistics trails, weapons caches, and communication signals. And once that data is collected, it can be shared, acted upon, or used to support kinetic operations if and when decisions are made. And this is why terrorist groups fear surveillance more than immediate strikes, because surveillance means exposure, and exposure means vulnerability. Nigerian security officials have acknowledged, off the record, that the US surveillance flights resumed after brief operational pauses to recalibrate following the Sokoto strikes, and that these flights are part of a broader intelligence sharing framework discussed during high-level meetings between Nigerian security leadership and US defense officials earlier in December. Meetings that focused on expanding cooperation against jihadist threats in West Africa, particularly as instability spreads across the Sahel following coups, weakened regional alliances, and the withdrawal of Western forces from countries like Niger and Mali. The resumption of ISR over Sambisa also coincides with mounting evidence that ISWAP has been consolidating control over parts of the Lake Chad Basin, imposing taxes, recruiting fighters, and rebuilding supply chains disrupted in previous years. An analyst warned that ignoring these signs could allow the group to regain the kind of territorial influence Boko Haram once held, something that would be catastrophic not just for Nigeria, but for the entire region. What makes this moment particularly significant is the contrast between external urgency and internal paralysis. For years, Nigerians have watched as insecurity worsened while political leaders issued reassurances. Communities were disarmed, vigilantes were criminalized, and known terror sympathizers spoke freely without consequence. Yet, suddenly, after US involvement, movements are detected, reactions are swift, and intelligence assets are mobilized, raising uncomfortable questions about why similar urgency was not sustained domestically. The Sambisa surveillance has already triggered reactions from various quarters. Some Nigerian voices welcome it as overdue assistance in a war Nigeria has been left to fight alone despite being overwhelmed. Others criticize it as erosion of sovereignty, but many ordinary Nigerians, especially those in affected regions, see it simply as hope. Hope that someone is finally paying attention to what they have endured for over a decade. Hope that the forests where their loved ones disappeared are no longer invisible.
It is important to understand that the US does not deploy surveillance assets lightly. ISR missions are expensive, resource-intensive, and strategically prioritized. The fact that Sambisa is once again under close watch means it ranks high on threat assessments, and that threat is not hypothetical. It is based on patterns of violence, intelligence intercepts, and recent attacks, including the IED blast on the Yartasha-Dansado road in Zamfara State, which occurred shortly after the Sokoto strikes and demonstrated how terror groups adapt quickly, retaliate symbolically, and seek to project relevance after being hit. That blast, which targeted a heavily escorted convoy and left craters on a major highway, showed that terrorists are signaling defiance, and notably, voices that had loudly condemned foreign strikes fell silent on the civilian casualties caused by the explosion, reinforcing suspicions about selective outrage and ideological alignment. The connection between Sokoto, Zamfara, and Sambisa is not accidental. It reflects a coordinated ecosystem of insurgency, where pressure in one zone triggers activity in another, and this is precisely why surveillance has expanded, to prevent blind spots, to connect the dots, and to anticipate rather than react. Nigerian officials have publicly stated that any foreign surveillance or operations occur with awareness and coordination, but details remain classified, and that secrecy fuels speculation, mistrust, and misinformation. Yet, from a strategic standpoint, secrecy is also necessary to protect sources, methods, and operational integrity, especially when dealing with groups known for infiltration, leaks, and insider collaboration. The broader geopolitical context cannot be ignored. The US is recalibrating its Africa strategy amid growing Chinese and Russian influence, particularly through security partnerships, arms sales, and infrastructure loans. And counterterrorism remains one of the few areas where the US maintains leverage, capability, and justification for involvement. Nigeria, as Africa's most populous nation and one of its largest economies, sits at the center of this recalibration, and instability here has ripple effects far beyond its borders. For Nigerians on the ground, however, geopolitics mean little compared to survival. For farmers afraid to go to their fields, travelers fearing highways, worshippers attending services with one eye on the door, parents sending children to school with prayers instead of assurance, and communities living under the shadow of forests that have become synonymous with death. The surveillance over Sambisa does not guarantee immediate relief. It does not automatically mean bombs will fall, but it does mean the world is watching a place that Nigeria has too often been left alone to confront, and that watching may change calculations on all sides. Terror groups know that sustained surveillance limits their freedom of movement, increases paranoia, disrupts planning, and raises the risk of internal betrayal. It forces them to communicate less, move less, and trust less, and over time that pressure can be as damaging as direct military action. Critics argue that aerial bombardment alone cannot solve Nigeria's insecurity, and they are right. Terrorism is fueled by poverty, governance failure, corruption, and ideological manipulation. But surveillance is not a solution by itself. It is a tool, and tools matter when wielded strategically. The silence or opposition from certain influential figures following these developments has also drawn attention, particularly contrasted with the relief expressed by communities that have borne the brunt of terror violence. And this divergence highlights Nigeria's deep internal fractures along ideological, regional, and political lines that terrorists exploit skillfully. As surveillance continues over Sambisa, the coming weeks will be critical. Intelligence gathered now will shape decisions later. Whether that leads to targeted strikes, joint operations, or strategic restraint will depend on political will, risk assessment, and international calculations. But one thing is certain: Sambisa is no longer ignored, the skies above it are no longer empty, and the narrative that terrorism in Nigeria is contained has been shattered once again. Nigerians must now ask hard questions. Why did it take external action to refocus attention on known terror sanctuaries? Why are known enablers still free? Why are communities punished for self-defense while terrorists roam forests? And what kind of leadership allows insecurity to fester until outsiders intervene? This moment is not just about aircraft and forests, it is about accountability. It is about whether Nigeria will finally confront the roots of its insecurity or continue to manage its symptoms. It is about whether intelligence will translate to protection for citizens or become another classified report filed away while blood is spilled. And as this story continues to unfold, one thing remains clear: Nigeria's fight against terrorism is far from over. But for the first time in a long while, Sambisa is now under a lens powerful enough to expose what has long thrived in the shadows, and the world is watching.